Hi guys, welcome to my vlog on skills and capacities in locomotion. This vlog will be examining two athletes of either a skill or capacity deficit in an acceleration and a 5:05 change of direction drill, and then the attached necessary interventions for each athlete. Here we have our first athlete performing an acceleration, and as you can see there's a decent extent of forward lean, but it's not quite that 45-degree angle recommended by the technical model. However, upon ground contact, the point of contact is ahead of where the theoretical centre of mass would be, giving the athlete a positive touchdown distance. This is termed overreaching. As we can see, the athlete makes no attempt to pull back and drive the leg spring under the centre of mass and behind it, but rather overreaching and grabbing at the ground ahead of them. And this is further highlighted by the shank angle change despite no further knee drive of the leg contralateral to the stance leg. This is likely to cause greater braking forces upon ground contact, stemming from a greater touchdown velocity, and is a suboptimal method of force application in the horizontal vector. Collating all of this information with the high heel recovery post-stance, with the lack of knee drive, arm drive, femur not being perpendicular to the torso, trunk lean, in order to counteract the counterclockwise rotation generated upon ground contact. And then finally, difficulty performing running mechanics drills. This evidence indicates that there's likely to be a skill limitation, which then, as aforementioned, impacts the athlete's ability to produce force appropriately. This in mind then, intervention for this athlete would focus on a technical breakdown of the movement and just work on the athlete's ability to replicate the lower limb kinematics inherently characteristic to the acceleration pattern. This could be achieved through something like a wall drill, cueing the athlete to contact the ground behind the centre of mass, applying force to the ground and staying robust at the hip, attempting to achieve full extension upon ground contact. This can then be progressed on to A-skip and A-skip variation mechanics drills to reinforce that reflexive flexion extension pattern, combined with reintroduction of the arm drive to balance transverse rotation and the application of force to the ground. Can then be progressed on to band-resisted acceleration, where the athlete is told not to cover as much ground as possible, but to attempt to replicate kinematics describing the wall drill. What we would expect to see moving forward then is the athlete pulling back just before stance to establish ground contact behind the centre of mass, from which the athlete is in a better position to apply force to the ground to counteract the rotational torque acting upon the body created by gravity, reflecting kinematics closer to the technical model and therefore result in a greater horizontal acceleration. Moving on to athlete 2, we can see during the acceleration he has a decent forward lean, a coordinated reflexive flexion extension pattern, decent amount of arm drive and knee drive as he transitions between stance and swing, and a straight line between foot and shoulders at latter stance. But again, similarly to athlete 1, at ground contact the athlete depicts a largely positive touchdown distance, initiated well ahead of the centre of mass. As mentioned in the previous analysis, this can raise the impact of braking forces stemming from a greater touchdown velocity, which is present when the athlete doesn't pull back to initiate ground contact behind his centre of mass. Athlete 2 attempts to counteract the upwards rotation created by the positive touchdown distance through a prominent trunk lean, which is far from the technical model. Whilst the compensatory movement patterns are similar between the two athletes, removing the necessity to maintain force production on the ground, the athlete is able to replicate a large amount of the technical model that describes an acceleration pattern. Moreover, the use of an acceleration with a falling start demonstrates a greater increase in trunk lean at early stance or ground contact, which may be reflective of a greater touchdown distance. This highlights the fact that it's likely that this athlete has a capacity deficit in his ability to produce force at the lower extremities to counteract the rotational torque imposed on the body by gravity. As such, this athlete's intervention should involve strengthening of the extensors of the lower extremities across different regimes. These exercises should range from general strengthening work, both bilaterally and unilaterally, as well as exercises more specific to sprinting, such as front foot elevated split squat with a free heel to mimic the isometric action at the biarticular plantar flexors upon ground contact. This work can then be progressed on to more power-based exercises, such as broad jumps, and a drop jump to promote powerful triple extension. Finally, this work can then be supplemented by heavier banded accels in order to overload components of the technical model that have been aforementioned. As a caveat, however, observing this athlete undertaking an acceleration with a prone start demonstrates that he maintains his forward lean in the first few steps, with a ground contact behind his centre of mass. In addition to this, no heel drop is evident at this stage, suggesting that potentially the athlete does have the ability to apply sufficient force, however is impeded by the movement pattern adopted previously when this capacity was not present, highlighting clearly the intricacy of the relationship between skill and capacity. As such, the discussed intervention for this athlete should be accompanied by technical speed work to optimise the chances of improving this athlete's ability to accelerate. Moving on then to the change of direction drill, we can see our first athlete struggling to create stiffness as he enters the turn, and this impacts his speed in the preceding acceleration. We can observe in the video the athlete taking a large number of steps when approaching the 5 metre line, beginning his deceleration less than halfway through the initial acceleration. Further, we can also observe an imbalance from left to right. During the right-sided change of direction, the athlete stays lower to the ground and his centre of mass has a greater tendency towards the new direction of travel comparatively to the left side. As the athlete in the video is a cricketer that turns off of his right side when he runs to, this may explain the difference between the left and right side. Given the athlete's reluctance to maintain his velocity when approaching the turn, it is likely that the athlete is impacted by a skill issue, specifically unfamiliarity with the task. In their intervention, therefore, this athlete should work through the regress version of this drill and be cued to approach with a higher speed, to maintain his velocity into the turn, take fewer steps and punch away level with the cone, creating a good level of stiffness and re-accelerating. The athlete can be progressed to banded deceleration, which overloads the pattern and promotes the generation of stiffness. And then once comfortable with this, the athlete can then progress on to an overloaded version of the initial drill. Progressing even further and opening up into the decision-making part of agility, drills like this can be used for batting and fielding scenarios, during which stimuli can be added such as position of the opposing team, position or direction of the ball's travel when in play, or interaction between batting pairs can be used to add volatility to a scenario, therefore challenging the technical model and their versatility in changing direction. Moving on to our final athlete and our final task. Athlete 2 demonstrates a decent maintenance of velocity approaching the turn, takes fewer steps compared to Athlete 1, and generates a good shift of his centre of mass towards the new direction of travel. At the turning point, the athlete creates a good level of stiffness, with knee flexion into the turn being minimal. However, comparing this to the right side, the athlete retains the same approach velocity and style, but struggles to create the stiffness required upon ground contact. This is largely evident from the shin angle change throughout the duration of ground contact and the lateral knee tracking as the athlete attempts to exit the turn and re-accelerate in the new direction. Interestingly, this athlete suffered about 3 years ago a lateral injury to his right knee while skiing, which appears to have led to a weakness in the right leg, impacting upon his ability to absorb force and create stiffness in the frontal plane. This should therefore be appropriately targeted with general strength work in the frontal plane, as shown here, incorporated with landing mechanic work, target the eccentric mechanism of force absorption. This landing mechanic work can then be progressed to an overloaded version, such as a lateral hop and stick, any rebounding work, for example, a lateral rebound hop, and then to an overloaded pattern of change of direction, but scaled back for distance. Bat and strength would be chosen depending on the athlete's ability to create stiffness at that given point during the intervention. Progressing forward, this athlete would then undertake a banded lateral decel drill, which would target that eccentric phase in maintaining the straight line between the point of contact on the ground and the shoulders and the head, aiming towards the new direction of travel, and ultimately overcoming the velocity increase as a result of using the band to remain robust in the deceleration pattern. Progressing forward, I'd expect to see this athlete exhibiting patterns that are closer to the technical model, which would then allow us to improve the athlete's agility as a holistic package. As a setter in volleyball, performance for this athlete as a setter is contingent upon stability when setting. Therefore, emphasis during this intervention should be placed upon the deceleration to prepare for the jump set, which is a sequence that should be considered when progressing this athlete to be able to change direction under the additional stimulus of a decision-making process relevant to the sporting context. In conclusion, the flaws observed for both athletes in the acceleration and change of direction drills appear to be similar in their deviance from the technical model. However, the difference between the two athletes is the underpinning mechanisms causing the performance of each task. This is testament to the complexity of learning and development of skills, which are fundamental in sport. This development hinges upon the comprehension of technical components and then the retention of the facilities that allow their execution. However, inherently sport is full of the performance of open skills which are preceded and proceeded by response to adverse stimuli, for which the athlete has to be prepared. Therefore, it could be argued that the truly optimal acceleration or change direction performance for the athletes analysed in this video vary significantly from the technical model. Therefore, in sporting situations, the establishment of a ready position upon deceleration allows the athlete to stay versatile in their acceleration or change of direction. As such, following the affirming of these technical aspects, training should build in the decision-making process to retain sport specificity. It is important to note, however, that this is underpinned by a closed practice of the skill, which then allows the athlete to manage the demands placed upon them in their individual sporting context. Thanks for watching.